Midlife crisis, the real purpose and the effect and the impact on relationships and especially romantic relationships in divorce, but this can also include other relationships as well, such as business partnerships, really close friendships, or other types of family relationships. So I get a lot of comments about midlife crisis and the fact that I'm glorifying midlife crisis or glorifying the problems that people are going through, as well as in some cases people are interpreting what I'm saying that I'm encouraging divorce. So there's no doubt about it. Midlife crisis can be really tough, and it's kind of meant to be tough, to be honest, because it's encouraging people to look at things and to evolve in ways that maybe they hadn't considered, but that they really need. In fact, they hadn't considered at all, but they really needed. So I want to clear up some of what that is in this video. And I'm going to be talking about some things that are spiritual in nature, because believe it or not, midlife crisis is something that happens spiritually. So I'm probably going to be more technical in this video than I have in other videos, at least ones that I've done publicly. I've talked about some of these things for people who have taken my private classes, and or if they've heard me speak at other events, I've talked about some of the technical aspects of midlife crisis. So let's clean up some of the misconceptions that you may have had. So one of the misconceptions is that midlife crisis is a choice. So there are other challenges that people can be going through in life that are not actually a midlife crisis, that may in fact be a choice. What I'm talking about with midlife crisis is it's your personal growth theme, your major personal growth theme, your karma theme, your spiritual theme of this life. And when you get through it successfully, you have mastered your core or your level of personal karma. So you may have other karma that's not related to the theme of your midlife crisis. So all of that needs to be gone in addition to the one that's on the theme of your midlife crisis. And that's actually the karma piece of the first stage of enlightenment. Now, there are other criteria for enlightenment, mostly about the meditative state or how much you can control your mind. But part of it, and a very big part of it, is the karma part, or rather being karma free to a certain level. Now, the midlife crisis part, midlife crisis starts at age 37, approximately age 37. And it continues. Your midlife crisis actually doesn't end in your life, although the symptoms may not be as strong or as intense. But it continues until that personal karma is gone. And for some people, other levels of karma, such as family, ancestral, leadership, and or cultural karma. So midlife crisis starts at approximately age 37. Now, for most people, if you have a contemplative practice or a meditative practice where you have a high degree of self-awareness, you might catch it right at age 37. There are a growing number of people today that applies to. In the past, that was a very low number. So most people would have a long stage 2, possibly stage 3 of midlife crisis. That's where you just kind of can't figure out what's going on. You just feel this uncomfortable feelings, and you could kind of push them aside, a lot of people, and ignore them until about age 41. Then there's another astrological alignment. Yes, I'm talking about astrology here. Midlife crisis has to do with astrology. And if you haven't done that inner spiritual transformation work yet, things will start to occur in your life to help you feel or see the area of your midlife crisis, along with bigger feelings of discomfort and dissatisfaction. So let's talk about karma, because even in the traditional sense, there are two different meanings. And today, sometimes people are using that word just in general to mean energy. Karma definitely is energy, but it's a little bit more specific than that. So in the yogic tradition, which is connected to the Hindu tradition, it has traditionally meant you get back what you put out. In the Buddhist tradition, they use karma to mean the negative part of that. and they use the word merit for the positive aspect of that. So even though I teach a lot of stuff related to the more yoga tradition of meditation, I do have extensive Buddhist training as well. And that I use the definition for midlife crisis and karma. What we're talking about is the negative aspects. So what happens when we have karma on something, you become blind to seeing how you're behaving or how your beliefs or how you're manifesting things or using a particular set of skills or traits that you have, a default way of looking at the world, and it becomes so strong that you can't do things in another way, or you're not willing to do things in another way, even when that's the thing that's really going to work. And that's what causes the dissatisfaction. Now, the biggest irony is people say I'm glorifying midlife crisis, because when you actually go through the transformation to do the inner work, it leads to satisfaction, and it leads to you being able to do things either in relationships or on your own or out in the world. It depends the theme of your midlife crisis, and there are 12 main ones, that you are able to do things and approach things in a way that's going to succeed for you where you were failing at it in the past and not understanding why you were failing at it in the past. Now, in many cases, this is the transformation part that's uncomfortable that people are trying to avoid. So if you want the satisfaction, the way to do it is to go through the transformation of midlife crisis, and spiritual techniques are the fastest way to do that. They're not the only one. I've seen people, there's about 1 in 1,000 chance that you can succeed at your midlife crisis theme without doing spiritual techniques. But it does take a long time, and it takes a lot of trial and error. So if you want to do it faster, spiritual techniques are what work. Now let's wrap this back around to relationships, to marriages, to divorce, to what I am suggesting around that and what I see works and what doesn't work. So if your partner is going through midlife crisis and you are not, then the best thing that you can do for them is to support them on their spiritual work to the extent that that's appropriate. Now, kind of knowing what their North Node is, and again, North Node is a astrology alignment that determines your core personal karma in this life. Now, I'm not going to talk a ton about North Nodes in this video. I will mention them. I have other videos on North Node and karma and astrology and midlife crisis, so you can check those out. If you want to know more, you can also ask me questions either in the comments or reach out to me. Now, there are 12 major themes, just like there are 12 major signs in astrology. So again, check out more about that. Now, your North Node, how you approach this in terms of relationships will depend on your personal North Node, whether or not you're going through midlife crisis, and the North Node of the other person. But for most people, this is an inner transformation, even if they you or the other person has to express that in terms of how your relationships change. It's still a personal transformation. And you can't do that for another person, and you can't expect yourself to do that for somebody else. Now, your North Node affects you until all of your personal, until you've mastered the lessons of that North Node. And then we go on to other levels of karma. So I will do a separate video on that if you want it. So just drop that in the comments. So when a situation comes up and you're trying to do it from your default way because you have blind spots, which is karma, it just doesn't work out. And then when you transform and you erase that karma or balance that karma, you just don't have that karma anymore, then you have a new reaction, a new way of thinking about it, and a new way of being and acting, so you get different results. And guess what? It's satisfying. You don't have that upset that you had in the past. So how this challenges or can challenge relationships, it doesn't always, is if a relationship is a bit codependent, a lot codependent, or if you want your partner to change, whether that's a marriage or otherwise. This applies to business relationships. This applies to close friendships. It may even be somebody else in your family you have a close relationship that's going through midlife crisis. So I find that the best spiritual practice is if you're the person watching somebody else do this and want them to change, practicing for yourself is the best thing that you can do. And then once you have that more advanced spiritual awareness and skills and abilities, then you will know, is it appropriate for you to do anything, or do you let this or know how to handle it with the other person? And most of the time that means let them handle it themselves until they're ready to talk about it or execute on it. So the reason why people say that I'm glorifying midlife crisis is that this spiritual transformation is beneficial for people that are ready for it. And you can make yourself ready for it. So midlife crisis, as I mentioned earlier, does start out pretty gentle around age 37. So if you have a spiritual practice that's contemplative, usually meditative techniques and related techniques to that work very quickly to get through midlife crisis faster, then you can be done in a year. I've even trained people in the past that have taken, less than that to successfully go through all the stages of midlife crisis and not have personal karma anymore, and be able to do the thing that their midlife crisis and be able to do it regularly, whatever their north node was. Now, if you don't do it or you're not aware, you stay in kind of stage 2, stage 3, going back to stage 2, and don't really get to stage 4 or 5, and 6 is where it's done. By age 41, things can get pretty intense. And that's when people tend to act out the most, and that usually events will manifest in your life so that you will understand what your midlife crisis theme is about. And usually you create these events yourself. And you're doing it because a deep drive that you have before you're born is to grow spiritually, and at least grow in consciousness, grow as a human. So if that word spirituality is a little too strong for you, it maybe doesn't agree with your personal spirituality, it's like, think of it as your human evolution. It's that drive to have that human evolution. And the reason why it seems like people say I'm glorifying it is it's like that I believe that that's a positive thing. When humans evolve, when individual people evolve, then especially if they're doing it in a spiritual way, then things tend to go better for them and for others. So if you're a person that's watching somebody else that's really important to you going through midlife crisis, what is it that you need to do yourself to learn, to evolve, to grow? Let me know. Let me know in the question, in the comments below, what you think that is, or maybe you have no clue, or where your challenges are on that. Just let me know in the comments. I also want to let you know that if you are afraid of change, there are techniques that you can practice that really reduce the fear. And people think, well, fear is a really strong term. Any negative emotion is on the fear scale as far as your human nervous system is concerned. So anything, whether it's anger or irritation, just kind of mildly little, I don't really like that, or something sad or really strong, all of those trigger like the fear response in the human nervous system. And there's techniques that work on your energy body as well, so that you feel stronger and you feel safer in yourself, so that you can make changes a lot more easily and effectively, and they're the right ones. So a lot of people get upset when one partner is going through midlife crisis. Is because things are changing. So sometimes, yes, people can create a lot of unnecessary drama, unnecessary damage to themselves and others going through midlife crisis. And I am not glorifying that, because in most cases, it's not necessary. If the person going through midlife crisis is practicing the techniques that are going to help them with the spiritual growth aspect or the consciousness growth aspect, if you prefer that term, then a lot of that goes away because they're working on the right issues. However, it's really important to remember that the only way through this is to really grow. So I'm going to give you, share an example with you right now, because there are times where divorce and or splitting up may be appropriate, at least a temporary split up. But I want to be really clear. If a relationship is otherwise healthy, there's no abuse, there's, minimal codependence or no codependence, then staying together at least until midlife crisis is done is usually the best course of action, because a lot of people blame their relationship for their dissatisfaction and it's misplaced. So if the relationship is otherwise healthy, I do recommend that people stay together until the midlife crisis is done, and then they can look at it from a perspective of being, karma-free, knowing where their own default karma is, and how to stay out of it, how to practice the opposite, which will work for them, and make decisions that aren't based on this feeling of discomfort. However, of course, if there's any abuse involved or if there's codependence, then it may be, at least on the short term, wise to, first of all, get relationship counseling on that aspect of it and or practice spiritual techniques that are going to help you overcome that. But also keep yourself safe in the short term. And even some of those relationships, when the karma's gone, can work out and be healthy. But it's important that you be safe, first of all. And second of all, that you make the decisions from a place of clarity, a place of knowing what you really want and what both partners want. So I'm going to share a little story with you, because sometimes divorce is the right thing in midlife crisis. So sometimes you may have picked a partner not for the healthiest of reasons, not that it's going to help either partner's personal growth journey, and or the partners might be growing at different rates. So if you don't like the word partner, you can say spouse, but I'm including broader range of relationships here. So if one partner is growing really quickly and the other partner can't do it for whatever reason, it might not be appropriate to stay together. And or if the partners are growing in different ways, there just might not be enough common ground to have a healthy, happy marriage or other type of relationship. Again, that can be worked through with personal clarity and with a lot of love for both partners, for themselves, as well as loving the others in the relationships, and any other important things such as children or other aspects that you've created together in your relationships, which could be assets, could be financial, could be businesses, could be a whole lot of things. It could be volunteer work. It could be so many things that you've created together. And of course, dealing with that in a way that's healthy, if it doesn't make sense for the relationship to continue the way it has in the past as a marriage or other maybe relationship. So I'm going to share a story with you right now of a client that I worked with, but honestly, I've worked with a lot of clients. They have this same North Node, and it's a very similar story. So this client came to me. They were midlife crisis age. The reason why they came was they were feeling dissatisfied, but also they just didn't know how to deal with some of the challenges that they were going through in their early 40s that were as a result of their karma kicking in, their personal karma kicking in. Now, their partner had actually moved on and had another relationship, and this was a marriage, and they were trying to keep it together. They're trying to get their partner back into the marriage, but the partner had already moved on. So really, their partner was in two relationships, one with another person, one with them. And when they started practicing enough of the spiritual techniques, they started to realize that this wasn't healthy. and that they had a habit of trying to accommodate other people with the implied intention that through reciprocity, the other person would give them things. So they were trying to give all the time with the expectation that people would give back to them, which was going to make them feel safe. So once they learned for themselves, and this was their North Node, how to rely on themselves, how to feel safe for themselves, then they realized that this wasn't a healthy situation the way it was at that time. And at least for the short term, it might be better cutting things off, at least as a marriage was concerned. So they did that. And then they got a lot of the respect that they were actually looking for in the first place. They started to feel a lot better and things started to go. Now, this relationship actually did come around. It took a very long time to them getting back together again. It took more than, I think 10 to 15 years before they actually came back together again. But it happened to, but it would never have happened if both partners weren't doing, and especially the one that was my client, doing the spiritual growth journey to grow and to erase the karma and to heal the things within themselves and to develop within themselves the strength that they could really rely on themselves, which is their North Node karma. And they felt so satisfied doing it. Of course, there was sadness. Of course, there was, disappointment and a whole bunch of feelings around the relationship and the changes that happened in the family as a result. But ultimately, they were better off and they were more satisfied. And when this relationship did come back around for them, they were able to approach it from a new light. And it never really went away because they had so much in common. But when it came back as a romantic partnership, they were able to deal with it from an entirely different viewpoint and different light. And it was much healthier, more satisfying, and happy. But it did mean a lot of change over a long period of time. Now, I have worked with or taught people techniques in the past where they were going through similar challenges and divorce was the right thing. Usually because one of the partners was not growing at the same rate and or did not want to grow, was not interested in doing their spiritual work, and or it was codependent, or there was other negative things involved that were really not appropriate in a relationship. So in these types of things, the person doing the spiritual techniques, or sometimes it was the other one who was practicing spiritual techniques, realized that this isn't healthy and we need to stop, and or it's just come time to move on. So if one or both partners are doing the work for their midlife crisis, the spiritual work, the consciousness growth, the human evolution work, and there isn't codependence, and the marriage is otherwise healthy, or the relationship is otherwise healthy, it should last through a midlife crisis. And I totally recommend that if the relationship is mostly healthy, that it stays together until that inner transformation is done, and then make a informed decision from that point of view. What does make it hard is when both partners aren't evolving at the same rate. So sometimes that can be overcome with understanding, but it's really at its core about being with the right person that is going to help you evolve with your spiritual growth, and that you're not holding other people back on their spiritual growth.